Okay, let's get a check now. What's happening in the world of business? Our business editor, Kate Moody's here. Hi there, Kate.
Hi, Tom.
Now, the ongoing rollout of COVID-19 vaccines has given hope to the IMF with regards to its forecasts for the global economy.
Yeah, a spark of optimism there. Not entirely, but somewhat. Even as the number of coronavirus cases and fatalities continue to rise, the International Monetary Fund has raised its forecast for the world economy for 2021. Global GDP is now projected to grow 5.5% this year, rather than the 5.2% that was forecast in October. The U.S. economy is expected to expand at a much faster pace, largely because of the latest round of stimulus. But it's not all smooth sailing. Forecasts for economic growth in the Eurozone, as well as France, Germany, Italy, and Spain individually, have been scaled back slightly, while the UK's outlook has been significantly downgraded from 5.9% to 4.5%. China's economy is projected to grow around 8%. Well, the IMF warns that the virus and its new variants still pose a huge risk to economic activity around the world, and says that different countries are likely to recover at very different rates, with emerging economies in particular lagging behind. Well, earlier I spoke to Petya Koeve Brooks. She's the deputy director at the IMF's Strategy, Policy and Review Department, about whether the current pace of vaccine distribution was on the right track.
It's been a race between the vaccine and the virus. And what we have assumed in our forecast is that in advanced economies and some emerging markets, that there's a widespread availability of the vaccine in the summer of this year and some emerging and developing countries in 2022. But as you alluded to, there are risks in both directions. And we're particularly worried that, many countries do not have that access to vaccine, and it's not going to come until much later.
Now, throughout all this, even as we talk about GDP and economic recovery, we know that the suffering that's been brought on by this pandemic is unequally distributed. Women, young people, low-income workers around the world are facing bigger risks and a much longer road to recovery. Is that being adequately addressed? It's that Skype.
Got me last time.
This has been one of the tragedies of this crisis, that unequal impact within societies, and we see this across the world. This is not just one economy or two, and a lot of the efforts that governments have put in place has been to support firms, to support households. But I think there's still scope to be even more targeted and to really direct those resources to the groups that are affected most. So this is going to be a challenge even as the recovery comes about.
Let's check in on the day's trading action now. The major European indices closed higher. The CAC 40 and DAX ending about 1% and 1.5% up, respectively. AstraZeneca shares did rise about 0.7% in London, despite the controversy about its rollout of its COVID-19 vaccine. Wall Street's got a bit more of a muted session with less than an hour of trading to go. Shares fairly flat there, just slightly above the flat line. Shares of General Electric jumped 9% earlier on better than expected fourth quarter numbers. Drug maker Johnson & Johnson popping about 3%. European leaders are urging the Biden administration to step up when it comes to taxing and regulating digital giants. Addressing the Virtual World Economic Forum, or Davos Summit, Ursula von der Leyen insisted that reforming Silicon Valley was both a diplomatic and economic imperative. Claire Rush reports.
A new U.S. administration giving hope to EU leaders as they pursue their efforts to impose a digital tax on tech giants.
I hope that we can work with the new American administration to continue and boost the OECD's efforts to tax digital companies.
The freshly confirmed U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is open to the idea, telling lawmakers during her confirmation hearing that such a tax would enable Washington to collect a fair share from corporations while remaining competitive. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, has been leading stalled talks on a global framework to impose a global minimum tax for digital giants, such as Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. The idea is to prevent tech giants from establishing headquarters in countries with low corporate rates as a way to pay less taxes. In the absence of an international agreement, countries like France are pushing ahead with their own rules to tax tech companies, while the EU, for its part, has outlined a two-pronged approach to police online content and target market monopolies.
We want it clearly laid down that internet companies take responsibility for the manner in which they disseminate, promote, and remove content. There needs to be a framework of laws for such far-reaching decisions.
The EU's calls come as tech giants face increased scrutiny across the globe, including in the US, where Google and Facebook are facing antitrust suits.
Moving on to some of the day's other business headlines now. The European Commission has approved a €2.9 billion plan to develop batteries for electric vehicles. The program would give aid to manufacturers including Tesla, BMW, and Fiat Chrysler to help them compete in an industry currently dominated by Chinese producers. The volume of freight moving between the UK and EU is down 38% compared to the same period a year ago. Data from a European logistics company suggests that even with a Brexit deal, trade is certainly being weighed down. Shipments between the European mainland and Ireland, meanwhile, have increased. And champagne exports tumbled 18% last year as the pandemic hit demand for French fizz. Producers group CIVC said total sales of champagne fell to 245 million bottles in 2020 from almost 300 million in 2019. Demand is expected to remain flat for at least the first half of this year. I hope, of course, Tom, for champagne producers and others, that there'll be more reasons to celebrate as we hit the second half of the year.
Yeah, we could all do with a reason to celebrate something right now. Thank you very much indeed, our business editor, Kate Moody. Thank you.